Our third presentation in our Awaken 25 video series is all about human values. Specifically, we're going to explain why human values are important to us in our society. We will acknowledge the many types of human values in our culture, and we'll explain the source for values and how we've come to learn them, share them, and pass them on to future generations. More specifically, we will talk about a special class of values. We identify these values as foundational to human learning, and they are entirely consistent with a life focus. Further, we will pose what many consider to be a foremost challenge facing humanity in the present time. How do we successfully pass our values on to our children? Again, like much of what we talked about, it's good to have a clear understanding of what we mean by values and their relevance to our lives. As we stated earlier, values can be a tough subject to get people interested in. It's a word we often hear, and when we hear the word used in conversations, we typically have a vague notion of what is being referred to, but we suspect it's probably important. If you ask most people on the spot, what are values, or more specifically, what are your values, the typical reaction is to freeze, like a deer caught in the headlights, and they stare back at you as they grasp for an answer, as they struggle with a question not typically asked of them. Over the past 30 years, we've asked this question of people of all walks of life, and almost always the reaction is the same. If you were ever asked, what are your values? There's no need to freeze up. Your action could be quite different, one of self-confidence and certainty. Simply learn the answer to the question, and that's what this presentation and the Awaken 25 website are all about. We believe the best way to draw people into the subject of values and connect with them is to first focus the discussion on their personal values, the type of values they are practicing in their daily lives, and the type of values they want to be known for and exemplify in their communities, and most importantly, the type of personal values they want to teach their children and pass on to others. We believe a good way, perhaps the best way to reach people on humanity and life is by helping them recognize, discover, and understand human values. To understand that there are many values in life, yet only some are fundamental. Only some are foundational to the soul. Only some values build character and sound judgment. Only some values are aligned with God's essential truths. And these are the truths we champion for people to embrace in their everyday lives. The Dalai Lama has an interesting view of human values, as he commented to the listening world. Wherever I go to meet the public, spreading a message of human values, spreading a message of harmony is the most important thing. Testimony from a historical moral leader and the importance of values within humanity. Human values allow us to soar in life. They define who we are, and equally they define who we are not. They influence and shape our thoughts. They guide our discernment on choices we make. They direct and marshal our decisions into actions. They energize our expressions of humanity. They give us hopeful vision and goals in life. They impart to us proper direction, and in all, both ensure and assure us of true life. Human values are not contained by geography. They are present throughout the world, shaping and defining humanity with God's harmony. Values guide our thoughts in a world of chaos. Values focus our minds and hearts upon genuine needs in the world around us. They summon courage when crisis arises, clarifying our minds in the face of danger, and galvanizing us to action when we can make a difference in a life. Human values aid us in forming the key principles we organize our lives around, establishing what we truly believe in, our faith, determining what we will honor in our lives, constituting what we stand for, and equally what we will stand against, defining the precepts that we shall always hold dear, exerting the commitments we would die for, heralding the beliefs we hold sacred, confirming the knowledge we will pass on, verifying our commitment to family and nation, and steadying our conscience in a world of doubt. Human values are many, prolific in society, intersecting our lives, interwoven in our culture, and the impetus for personal and social force. Literally, they exist in nearly every aspect of our day, in our communities, in a matter of our inquiry, our judgments, our aspirations, our goals, in the decisions we make, the activities we choose, the motivations that spur us, in the achievements we pursue. Depicted here are some of the many categories of human values, and within each category there are numerous related sub-values and principles branching out, yet yielding direction and definition to people's standards, their philosophical beliefs, ideologies, their causes, and ethics. The categories of values cover nearly every aspect of human civilization. We ask you, why are values important to us? Why should we be concerned with values of all things, especially when we have so much in our busy lives to deal with? Jobs, school, kids, bills, health, family, friends, where we're going to eat, what we're going to wear, where we're going to go. You name it. So why be concerned about values? The answer, we think, is simple. In fact, we'd go as far as to say simple but critical to us. The answer we offer is entirely relevant to all our concerns in life, as life is fully defined, life of our body, life of our soul, life of our spirit, an extension of life all around us, all life. Values provide the gravity and glue to our existence, and without them, life would come apart. For this reason alone, above all others, values are essential to us, to our children, to our communities, to our very existence. Values, especially human values, are fundamental to the structure of our world. It gives sense to the natural order of chaos encroaching upon our reality. By following values and living them, we bring composition to the world around us and define ourselves in that world. Human values bring an order and a harmony to people and the confluence of society, and without them, chaos and anarchy would bear up upon us. Families could not form, communities would not cohere, and conflict would reign. In fact, civilization would not be possible. Values are our guidelight in humanity, shining a path to truth to our individual purpose, lighting our way to a collective role in society, nurturing our cooperation and binding us together with others for a greater good. Values ground us to life, the creation of life, life enrichment with learning and knowledge, life protection, life enablement with peace, dignity, and respect necessary for preserving all living, sentient beings. Values compel life perpetuation in health, medicine, research, and the caring for those among us who are helpless and at risk. Some values are formed by human reasoning, logic, philosophical inquiry, prayer, debate, meditation. Yet the most fundamental, the most life-enriching values are of God, and they are absolute, meaning that they cannot be changed nor disputed by humanity. They are above us and sacrosanct, removed from our inclination to tinker with and change. God-inspired absolute values are gifted to humanity. They are not bought nor earned. They are freely given, and they are not relative, or subject to the mind or opinion of man. They cannot be influenced by the human condition, circumstance, or opinion. They are not changeable by time, place, or circumstance. They are eternal and will remain what they have always been from the beginning of time to the end. When we spoke about life earlier, we noted how the ultimate, essential truths of life are from God, and how those truths are descriptive of God's true nature and being. We further conveyed these essential truths are gifted from God directly into our human souls, as common language and guidance. In this way, God has imparted foundational values to us without precondition, freely and with love. God is the original and ongoing source of all life, and God's Spirit envelops and channels into our world through inspiration and guidance, unending throughout human history. When we are consciously aligned with God's truths in our soul, absolute values blossom in our lives, and likewise, so develop in humanity. By natural consequence, values get reflected in the surrounding culture, in mores, norms, and human-created institutions. Upon the foundation of absolute values, upon the foundation of God's ultimate and essential truths gifted to us, all other human values and noble principles in humanity are both derived and emerge into our culture. into our societies and into our lives, such as the grand story of humankind and the relationship between a loving God and His creation. Values reflect beliefs we hold to, not only in our minds, but also within the context of how we engage in the world around us, how we interact with other people, families, friends, groups, and communities. In turn, culture and human institutions represent the confluence of the engagement across humankind, an interaction occurring over centuries in different regions of the world with different people and beliefs. As people interact, communicate, they organize formal associations. These associations codify and embed knowledge in surviving organizations, which store and safeguard such knowledge for posterity. When asked, where do values get their start in humanity? The answer is simple: from God. The essential truths define absolute values, flow from God's nature into the soul of humankind. Values begin with God and none other. The start of values in the heart of humanity began with the first humans, the first families, the nascent clusters of people across the planet. It continued as families grew into clans and tribes, eventually with larger groups of people as they bound together for purpose of self-survival and protection from the adversities of the wild and untamed earth. As groups of people grew into villages and people assembled for social events and learning from tribe elders, God inspired minds and through that inspiration stimulated human reasoning, with resulting consequence to the development of human intellect. Eventually, humanity was liberated from everyday survival and from superstition as philosophies, ideologies, and beliefs took form and emerged around the people of the world. Cultures developed, city-states grew, great empires formed, each with largely distinct societies, leaders, and peoples, each with distinctive political personalities, each with varying degrees of maturation. Throughout this emergence, God patiently raised and inspired prophets, intellects, great and common leaders, noble and simple souls, all for the purpose of guiding the development of humanity along moral pathways, teaching through personal will and example. Enduring suffering and sacrifice, they persevered to awaken truths in people's hearts and minds, to show a successful way forward. Human reasoning developed and expanded amongst the growing populations and divergent cultures, bringing forth development of sciences, rationalisms, artifacts, architecture, and robust civilizations. Eventually, as writing developed and knowledge accumulated within the predominant cultures of humanity, institutions within these cultures developed as well. In these institutions, the cooperation of humanity expressed itself in various associations. These associations emerged, matured, and changed, yet performed a vital role where the character and nature of culture found a home, a place to endure from generation to generation. Of these institutions, there are primary forms, which are the most impactful to people's lives. In these institutions, significant knowledge is traded and activity on human intercourse occurs, providing leadership, direction, development, guidance, governance, and laws. The primary institutions include religion, literary, legal, and civic, social and leadership, business and industry, academia and learning, arts, music expression, and communications. There are also secondary institutions. These typically form concurrently within the society and culture, along with the primary ones above. Secondary institutions are expansive and intrinsic to the human development of society. You can see the secondary listed out in the blue box. It's within these institutions human values embed and find a home. It's here where learning, knowledge, beliefs are protected, evolved, and changed. Most importantly, it is here in institutions where values are preserved in order to move through the history of time from one age to the next, one generation to another. This is the importance and role of human institutions, to hold, safeguard, and perpetuate the values of humanity. Of course, the growth of human values in humanity is not a static process. In fact, it's quite dynamic, changing, developing, growing, dying, and being reborn. And as individuals course their way through life, through humanity and prevailing cultures, the great river flows, churns, floods, recedes, and renews over the ages of our world and our existence. We would be remiss not to mention another dimension to what we are outlining. There is a contention to our reality and worlds unseen surrounding us with its presence, a presence of malevolence, devoid of God, extending an unrelenting hand upon the human mind, seeking to distract, deceive, seduce humanity away from God, away from the truths nested within their souls. This contention is a true darkness, devoid of light and cut off from the source of all life, God. It is bankrupt of absolute values and can be categorized as completely indifferent towards the well-being of any life whatsoever. Its nature harbors relentless animosity towards humanity. It is a darkness committed to the hatred of God and any life so created. Some call it evil. We do as well. Stepping away from the contention surrounding us, we should emphasize the primary institutions can and do have enormous influence on our lives, upon people and their families, upon organizations and governments, upon how and what is taught, upon the formation of laws and justice, upon intellect, innovation, and progress of society. Institutions influence how values are developed, or equally, how they can be eroded. In what we just covered, one can see how values have emerged as fundamental in human history. They have contributed both an essential and vital role in the development of cultures, and furthermore have sustained the health of our institutions, and thereby people and civilizations throughout the world. Foundational is the next concept we will give definition to in regards to human values, of which there are many. Foundational refers to the most important, those values which reflect the ultimate and essential truths of God. Throughout the growth of civilizations, many values and principles have emerged, drawing distinction between nuances of human endeavor and the scale of human thought. Yet among the many values and principles extolled, taught, followed, or not, there are some which are most important, some of which have the most relevance to human life. These values align with God's absolute truths, as they are one and the same. These specific values are most critical in shaping a successful disposition within us, a disposition towards life, as they provide the foundations necessary to form other valuable principles in human culture. We set these values apart from all others. These specific values are called foundational values, foundational to humankind, foundational to life of the body, the soul, and the spirit. Foundational values are of God, and by nature they are absolute, never relative, and always definitive. They are the most important and primary of all human values, entirely consistent with the purpose of life, and they emanate from God as ultimate and essential truths, reflecting His being and presence in our lives. Without foundational values, humanity could not stand, institutions would never constitute, and forms of human collaboration, cooperation, and exchange would not be possible. Foundational values are God-given, gifted and amplified through the prophets and wise men, who by their individual free will turned to God to be a conduit of God's inspiration to humanity, most times at grave threat to their well-being and lives. Moral matrix. Here we refer to the structure of understanding between your mind and your soul. It is where essential truths are structured in full definition, accessible by both your mind's reasoning and your soul's discernment. With acknowledgement of God's truths in our hearts and minds, a moral matrix emerges, composed of foundational values God has gifted into your soul. This matrix provides the content to guide human reasoning, human judgment, and eventual decision-making on all issues truly important in your life. When such a situation or circumstance arises, your inner matrix is consulted to guide you in weighing right from wrong, good from bad, the moral from the immoral. A relentless commitment to foundational values is the genesis for a free, open, and thriving culture, where ideas, communications, and perpetual development of society can grow and prosper, where people find themselves by realizing their individual purpose and the destination before them. Without foundational values, we wander through life in pursuit of meaningless ends. Foundational values are embedded in some way or another, largely in our primary institutions. Their definitions, reflected in ethics, mission statements, articulated visions, laws, universities, social principles, and codes of decent conduct. Quite literally, every aspect of human intercourse, exchange, and collaboration has some form of foundational values in their mix. Always know the utmost indicator of a foundational value is the answer to a simple question. Is the value generative of life? Does it create, nurture, protect, enable, or perpetuate life? Life of the body and mind, and extend it to the world. Life eternal to the human soul and spirit within. All life we can experience and know. It is, however, vital foundational values are passed on by being awakened in every human life, and passed on between generations in every season of humanity. We have a great responsibility to awaken the foundational values in our children and their children, generation to generation. While God freely provides these values to us within our souls, it's up to us to realize them. It is our solemn obligation to each other to bring these values out into human reasoning, decision-making, and action, in our lives and the lives of others, especially our children. A last thought we'd like to share is what we refer to as duty and challenge. Here we are speaking to an important obligation we have in our lives, to act upon the responsibility for which our knowledge of life requires us. It is said by some, wisdom begets obligation. Another word for obligation is duty, and where there is duty, there is challenge. Our duty is passing foundational values on to the next successive generation. It's an effort that requires our intellect, stewardship, outstanding leadership, courage, and persistence. Our collective strengths are needed to move these values across human history, without them being impaired, discarded, or changed, especially by worlds unseen. Accomplishing this feat, as St. Paul would say, requires a pure heart, a good conscience, and a sincere faith. We encourage this solemn duty and the challenge it poses to us as a lifelong activity we are all engaged in, for ourselves and especially our loved ones. We speak to it and share it with you today with enthusiasm and with the certainty of knowing it is right and good. We believe anyone who is a successful participant in this journey will simply change their life and the lives of others, and is truly a great and noble undertaking. And not to understate it, learning, teaching, and passing on foundational values within our family and the larger culture is perhaps the foremost challenge of our time. Worlds of contention, both unseen and seen, are relentless in a ravenous desire to destroy our foundational values and any knowledge or practice of them. In our next presentation, we will explore the nature of this contention against God's truths, as we explore the stark differences between absolute and relative moral philosophies, and the thoughts and actions of those who adhere to either of the two. Words, thoughts, and actions matter. Please continue with our narrative and go to presentation number 4.